Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you're logging in from. So nice to see you. I can see a few people already joining in the webinar. So just as people file in, because I know it takes a while for the Zoom room to open up, if you are here and you can hear me and you can see me, perhaps you could just pop into the chats that you are here. Give me some confidence that this is all working. Who have we got with us today? Excellent. Hi, Joanne. Hi, Ben. Thank you very much. Hi, Mary-Lise. Brilliant. So yeah, my name's Sarah Janes. I'm going to be talking you through some of the lessons that we've learned over the last couple of years delivering Security Champions programs. I'm also joined by my colleague, Leanne, who suspiciously also appears in the webinar as Sarah. So if you think, how come Sarah is talking and typing at the same time? She must be really talented. Not me, that's my colleague, Leanne. So type away if you've got anything that you'd like to discuss, pop it into the chat. We will be having a Q&A session later on, so if you've got any questions that you'd like answered, please fire away. And I also just wanted to let you know that we are recording the session, so if you've got anything that you'd like to talk about, then perhaps if we open your mic up, just don't mention your company name, and we can make sure that that's all kept protected. So I want to start off by asking everybody a little question. I want to ask you, what's the best thing that's happened to you so far today? Now, I do realise if you're joining us from the States, your day perhaps hasn't had very long in it, but even so, have a think about the best thing that's happened to you so far today. And perhaps you could let us all know in the chat window. For me, I'm going to share two things actually, because first of all, I decided to come into the office today to do this webinar. And when I got here, I realised I'd forgotten my pass card. My lovely colleague Leanne let me in, and not only did she let me in, she then brought me a lovely steaming hot cup of coffee. I mean, it's so rare, isn't it, these days with working from home, that somebody makes you a cup of coffee. That's the best thing that's happened to me so far today. Let's look. I can see there's a few other people. Hi everyone, a beautiful morning. Oh, somebody's launched a training course. Hi Victor, you had breakfast, Orla, thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, keep them coming in. The best thing that happened today, I love doing that exercise. So for a moment, I just want you to imagine you've gone away for a couple of years, and when you come back, everything you ever wanted to do with your Security Champions program had happened. People were taking responsibility for security. They were making change happen at the grassroots of your business, taking on new projects and programs. Instead of having to coax your Security Champions, actually they're just coming to you for support, for advice, for guidance. And really importantly, you are seeing improved business outcomes. You can measure the effect that your Champions program is having. So today I'm going to talk you through the process that we've been using, which has its roots in Appreciative Inquiry. And in fact, I've already used two elements of that technique already. First was asking you the best thing that had happened so far today. And secondly, asking you to imagine. So I'll come back to those in a moment. I'm then going to go through some of the phases of implementing a Champions program using the Appreciative Inquiry technique. I'll go through all of them at a high level, but I'll dive in quite some detail to the first stages. We won't have time, unfortunately, in a 1 hour session to go through them all in detail. I then want to have a look at some of the practicalities of implementing. So at this point, if you have any questions or queries or things that you would like to find out a bit more about regarding implementation that perhaps I've not covered, pop them into the Q&A and we'll come to them. And then finally, we'll round up with some ideas if people have got ideas they'd like to share, questions, and then I want to talk about what's next as well. So Leanne, if I could just ask you to pop up the first poll question, please. I'm just interested to know where people are on this call in terms of setting up their Champions program. Are you just considering doing one? Are you just about to launch? Perhaps you're already running your Champions programme, or just looking to reinvigorate. I'll just let that run for a moment. Okay, share the results. Okay, so we've got the majority of people on the call are just considering their Champions programme, and some that are already in the depths or just about to launch, so good luck to you, and a couple of people perhaps looking to reinvigorate their programme. Amazing. Listen, I hope that you all find something of value. So I'm going to talk you through this appreciative inquiry technique. So what is this word appreciative inquiry? Well, it is a change model, but instead of a traditional change model where we quite often start with what are the problems, what are the things we want to change, what are the things we want to make better, it flips traditional change models completely on their head. And it starts by asking, what's going well? Because when we know what's going well, we can find out how we can replicate those strengths and we can repeat them across the organisation. It is innately collaborative, and I'll talk you through all of that in a moment. So let's look in some more detail at some of the key concepts, some of the key assumptions around the appreciative inquiry in security technique. First of all, concept one, we say change is socially constructed. And what I mean by that is actually when we change, when we really change, we've usually had a conversation with somebody, haven't we? We don't decide, I don't know, I'm going to diet or go on a new exercise regime, pick up the guidance from Public Health England or your respective health authorities and suddenly just make a decision to change behaviour. Change happens through many interactions on a daily basis. It may be that we are talking to people. Somebody might contradict our thinking. Somebody might challenge our assumptions. We learn by asking questions of other people, through people putting things into context for us to make it real for our situation. And crucially, when we're given the opportunity to collaborate, the outcomes usually last a lot longer and they're much more, they're much better sustained because people have bought in to what they're doing and why they're doing it. So Leanne, if I could ask you to launch the second poll, and I just want to go back to right at the beginning when I asked you what's the best thing that's happened to you so far today. I just want to ask you how that made you feel. What happened when we asked you that question? I know every time we do this in workshops, people often say something relatively positive. So I'm hoping that it didn't make anybody sad or negative this morning or this afternoon. Let's see what people are saying. Upbeat and positive. Oh, okay, we have got a couple of people that said it didn't make any difference, and it didn't work for people. So I apologise for that. Yeah, overwhelmingly when we do this with our champions, they say things like, "It made me smile," or "It made me think, do you know what? I should do more of that because I really enjoyed it." So the reason that I asked you that is because the second principle or second concept set I want to talk you through is we have a choice to actively focus on the positive things. So imagine how different you may have felt if I'd have come into this masterclass today and said, "Hi guys, do you want to put into the chat all of the challenges that you've got with your Champions programme? What are the things that you're getting stuck with? What are all your barriers and problems? What's the worst thing that's happened to you so far today?" It probably would have created quite a different feeling. So this isn't saying that negatives don't exist. This is about looking at a situation a bit like when we say, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? we can make a decision to actively focus on the things that are going right. And when we do, there's a good reason for that. And that's because what we talk about becomes reality. If you think about this in the context of sport, I don't know about you, but I've never heard a boxer about to go in the ring in the pre-match interview saying, I think she's better than me. I think he's got a better right hook than me. Absolutely not. Muhammad Ali was famous for his trash talk. He said things like, they're going down in round 5. You know, I'm the greatest boxer. And I think still to this day, a lot of people would say that he is the greatest boxer. Whether that is fact or whether that's what he made us believe is a matter of opinion. And in security, we often are trained to look for the weaknesses. We're trained to look for things that we need to improve. And if our security trash talk is constantly focusing on the fact that the cyber criminals are one step ahead of us, that people are a real problem because we can't train them, or that cyber criminals have the upper hand because they don't have to live within the constraints of the law, then we are projecting an image where people, particularly outside of security, may think, do you know what? Is there any point? Because can I really make a difference here? Which is why I asked you about the best thing that had happened to you so far today, a really powerful exercise. So Leanne, I'm going to ask you to launch the third poll now, which is just to find out for your security department as a whole, where would you say your security trash talk generally fell? Are you talking in the mostly positives, or are you talking in the mostly negatives? Okay, that'll just take a moment or two to appear, I imagine. I keep my fingers crossed for the positives. And what have we got? Oh, okay. That surprises me to a certain extent. Okay, so we've got a bit of work to do here, perhaps on our security trash talk. So the fourth concept that I want to talk you through is about building on strengths. When we find out what an organisation or a group of people is already doing well, then we can build on those strengths. Now, if we take time to inquire, so this is the start of where the inquiry piece comes in with appreciative inquiry. If we find out what's already happening well, for example, we might have a sales department that is brilliant at selling. They bring all the revenue into the business, but they're a bit rubbish at security. We could say, how can we make them better at security? These are all the things that we're doing wrong. Or we could flip it and we could say, how can we understand why they're so good at selling? I hear you saying it's because they're getting a big bonus, which is true. Apart from that, what makes them come in and want to be that one step better than everybody else? And once we find those strengths out, how can we use those to build on them, to collaborate with them, to infuse that into the work we're doing with their behaviours, with security champions? And that was one of the reasons that I asked you about, can you imagine? That's another key element of appreciative inquiry, is to get people to imagine what a better future might look like. So the final concept of appreciative inquiry that I want to talk to you about now is when we focus on relationships, the results will follow. We are obviously task-driven, action-orientated people. So really, you know, we want to go into a situation, tick our list off as quick as possible and make a difference. But I'd encourage us all to take time to really build that relationship with people. Again, this is where the inquiry aspect comes in, to find out what makes them tick. Why are they there doing their job above and beyond the paycheck? And this can be with your champions. It can be with people who are receiving your security awareness. It can be with the senior leadership team. It can be with all of those partners that are there to help you succeed. Let's find out what is making them tick and why. So I want to pull this all together then into a model. And this is a model that we use for security champions, building in those concepts I've spoken to you about. So we start off by trying to discovering what works, discovering by asking our champions open-ended questions, uncovering the core values and the reasons why things work so well where they work. And they may be security things, or they may be things that they bring in from their outside functions. But why? You know, is it pride? Is it teamwork? Is it collaboration? There's some really core foundational things that people come to work and they want to do above and beyond their paycheck. We then ask people to dream, and this is quite a funny word actually, because we're perhaps used to using the word creating a vision or imagining the future when we're talking business terms, but dream is slightly different, because we're not saying it's completely away with the fairies, but it's a challenge. It is stretching, and also it is inspiring. And it's something that we ask champions to do. And we say, with no holes barred, imagine that you had everything at your power. What would the outcome look like? We then move into a process where we collaboratively design the future. And that happens by using the key and core values that have been discovered in this phase and matching them bit by bit by bit with what the group has dreamed, or their vision, their image of the future. And that process is iterative. So we are constantly having the questions. We are constantly seeing how we can feed back the learning, the stories into discovery to create bigger and better dreams, to design better and better processes alongside our champions. So let's start to talk through some of the stages now. It splits down: discover, dream, design, deliver. First of all, we look at establishing the life-giving strengths of an organisation. And then we locate key themes. We collectively create an image of the future before we start to design and plan. And then as a security team, of course, we need to support to help deliver that programme. So as I said, I'm going to talk you through these. I'll go into quite a fair bit of detail on this initial workshop, not quite so long on these other ones. And I'll come back to this slide, so don't worry if it moves off your screen too quick. So we start with this workshop where we share stories. We share stories of times where things have worked really well. So this first get together with champions, this could be an existing champions network that's gone a bit flat. It could be a group of new champions. And I would always recommend, if there's any way that you can ensure that your champions are volunteers rather than being told, that is really, really powerful. So the first workshop will start with the group sharing stories. They share stories of times where things worked at their best. Now, a storytelling workshop may seem like a bit of an odd place to start, but what it does is it gives the opportunity for us to find out things about people, how they operate in their real life, their core values. And after a short period of explaining the exercise, which I'll go through, we split people into pairs and we say to them, you have 30 minutes to really listen to your partner's story, and your partner has 30 minutes to really listen and hear your story. And we're asking them to share their experiences of times where they have protected the organisation and they have felt alive, motivated, engaged, etc. And we're really trying to uncover here the life-giving forces that made that possible. So, you know, they could be stories as big as, I prevented a data breach. They could be stories that are seemingly as small as, I walked up to somebody in the foyer and challenged them to show me their ID card because I didn't see them wearing them. The point that we're trying to get here is why. Why did they do that? What made them walk across to that person in the foyer and protect the business? Probably not just because somebody told them to do that. What are the underlying reasons? So as I said, we would split people into pairs. And here's an example of some of the questions that we would ask. I'm just going to read this first bit to you. Today, I'd like to focus on an exceptional moment you've experienced at work. Tell me a story about one of those special moments. Now, the reason that we say story is we don't want just to hear about somebody's objectives. We want to hear the detail. So tell me a story about one of those special moments when you felt your role as a defender of the organisation made you feel alive, completely involved, enthusiastic and committed to your work. So we advise people to really listen to what their partner is saying. We have some sub-questions here, but they're only really used to prompt the person if they dry up, because half an hour is quite a long time to talk about your story. They're there just to prompt people and also to help them if they've perhaps gone down into a very technical explanation. That can happen sometimes. People start to share their story and then they quite quickly feel comfortable telling you about the process or about the technology that they used, but not about some of these key things here about, what was it that drove you? What was it that you were part of a team? Was it that something that's inherently in you? So we are going to send to you after today's webinar a handout for writing good appreciative inquiry questions. So you'll all receive that. I think probably tomorrow the email will come out. But yes, little handout on writing good appreciative inquiry questions. But the core concept is every question should invite people to tell a story. Because when we tell a story, we just hear and find out so much more. So as I said, I'd come back to this slide and then I'll pause. I can see in the corner a few things coming in chat, so I'll pause after this slide and have a look at that. So we've done that workshop. Now we would suggest about 3 hours for that. We start off with explaining the process that we're going to be using. We introduce some of the key concept of appreciative inquiry. We would get them to have a go at it by doing what's the best thing that happened to you today exercise, just as a little warm up. And we would also have created, the security team would have created a really inspiring provocation. So the provocation was this bit where we asked them to imagine something that can really hook people in and think, wow, I would like to be part of that. I think it's important to remember that initial provocation isn't telling them what they should be doing, but it's inspiring them to what could be. So once the pairs have shared their stories individually, we then invite people back in the main group to share some of those stories. And we hear some amazing things, absolutely amazing things. Anybody that's heard me speak at Sands before has probably remembers me telling about one guy that literally jumped off out of the chair and said, "Have you met Bob? Bob is a hero. Have you heard what Bob did for our business?" So we can really get some energy up during those sessions. And it brings people who are perhaps a little bit skeptical initially into the session. We then ask people to write up their stories, and that can be physically typing up their stories or perhaps just recording them on a phone. But those stories are so powerful as a reminder of what really works and why we're here. Share not just with the champions team, but perhaps with your peers, perhaps with the senior leadership team in security who may be thinking, what am I going to get out of this champions network? Perhaps they can be shared right across the business to encourage more champions to join the programme. After we've done that, we give the champions as a group the opportunity to read or listen to everybody's stories. And then at another session, people are broken down into smaller groups, probably about 4. And at this session, we're asking people to identify some of the core themes that they saw, they heard coming up at the stories. And that it's not about identifying the one that came up most. You know, it may be that somebody said teamwork 50 times, but pride only came up twice. But actually, the group feels, do you know what? Pride is so important in getting people to do the right thing that we want to include it as a core theme to take forward. The third session then breaks up into 2 parts. First of all, asking people to do an individual imagining session, a bit of a meditation on their own. And I won't spoil it because I'm going to get us to do it very quickly at the end of the session as well. But they individually imagine what the future could look like. You know, if all of those core values were in play, what difference could it make? And then the next session is taking those individual images of the future, bringing them again to a small group of about 4 or 6, and as a team creating what the group view of the future might look like. And then asking, if this is what our future is going to look like, what are some of the core foundational things that need to be in place? What's some of the shape, what we would call the socio-technical architecture, some of the guiding principles, some of the roles that might need to be involved, some of the people that might need to be involved, some of the things that might need to happen to enable it. We're not getting down to the nitty-gritty at this stage. So typically what we end up with here, once we've kind of analysed everything that people have come up with, we end up with a number of programmes, if you like, programmes that have been self-determined by your security champions. And they can range from things like recruiting more champions to setting up a network or a community where the champions can get more knowledge. They could be things like going out and talking to people about some of their concerns. It could be about helping people with phishing emails. It could be about getting out to more team meetings. But we ask them usually at this point to basically select what they would like to work on more. And it might be the topic that they have decided on themselves in this section, or it might be a project that somebody else has brought up. But by the time we get to the design phase, the champions are effectively, they've got a vision of the future that they have created themselves. They have a project that they have selected that they would like to work on. And then we get down to the nitty-gritty, really. How is it going to happen? And I mean, we've seen some amazing things happen at this section. With one of the organisations that we were working with recently, literally, I think after this workshop finished, within about half an hour, there was emails going out to people. People were really taking responsibility and accountability and making stuff happen. The 5th and 6th phase here is really about the security team looking at what they can do to support the champions to achieve their projects and programs. And that could be things like helping them with some soft skills. Perhaps they've said, you know, we really want to go out and be visible within our functional teams, but we're not confident presenters. Is there something that we can help with there? We want to recruit more champions, but we're not quite sure of the technique. Is there something that we can help them with there? Are there things that we can do to get them in front of, for example, the senior leadership team, to get their visibility? And we're not talking in detail here about long-term programs, but this concept here is really core to being able to sustain your champions network. The champions join and get excited because it links in with a core value, but they stay because it then also aligns with career prospects. They're getting something else out of it, additional training, a community, time in front of the senior leadership team, many, many things like that. So I'm just going to pop into the chat now, bear with me, just to see if there's any questions that I need to answer. Hi, Alison, nice to see you. Hi, Alicia. Alicia, well, I don't need to read that out. Alicia has just said that this was fantastic for Tesco, which is brilliant. Are you sharing these slides? Yes, hadn't thought about that, but I will. And it's also being recorded as well, so perfect. Okay, Simon, I have a stakeholder who feels champions should be more like traffic wardens. How do we change their minds? Oh, that's a great question, isn't it? I would say, and I'm going to think of this for you, we can't tell him, can we, or her? We can't tell your stakeholder what they should think or feel, but is there a question? There's got to be a question that we can ask that stakeholder that perhaps provokes their thought a little bit, and I'm going to try and think of one for that. Pooja, any tips on how we sustain the programme, new and old champions on the page? Yeah, we'll come to these in a little more, and I think that's something that I'd like to cover in a follow-up session about sustaining. But for me, it's about three things. It's about giving them a community. It's about giving champions a place where they can learn as well. So the soft skills, and giving them a place where they can enhance their career prospects. So to get in front of senior managers, whether that's in function or whether that's in the security team. So as owners of the Champions programme, we are not sort of constantly trying to get them to do things, but we are thinking about how we can support them to develop career prospects, to get in front of senior management, and at the same time, obviously helping us with the core things that we need to with regard to their Champions programme. Right, I'm just going to answer this question from Justine, and then I'm going to move on. Do you recommend a role profile for champions so they're clear of their expectations? Kind of, Justine, yes, but I don't recommend that day one we say, hi, volunteer champions, here's your job description. Actually, what we would recommend is that they create their job description, you know, in collaboration and facilitated by you. But that could be a great question to ask in some of the latter stages of the workshops and the discussions that you're having with champions. You could say, you know, what do you think your role should be? How would you talk about your role if you were looking to recruit other people, and get them collaborating on what that looks like? It's fantastic when we're then trying to recruit more champions. Okay, right. I am now coming to implementation challenges. So yeah, as I mentioned, if you've got any implementation challenges, perhaps pop them into Q&A, and we can see if we can come to those specifically in a moment. I do not necessarily say that I'm going to be able to personally answer them all. However, we've got quite a few people on the call, so I'm sure other people have got ideas too, and I'd like to potentially open up people's mics if they want to share some of their own ideas and questions. So these are some of the things that we have seen on a number of occasions. First of all, as we all know, we tend to have two types of people, don't we? There's the people that are engaged a lot more with the creative side of things. They like thinking, having ideas, and not so fussed with tasks and action. And the people who are completely the opposite. Obviously, the first stages of security champions is very much in the creativity, and it's really worth making sure that the champions really clearly understand that they will get to a point where, you know, the detail comes. Otherwise, we can lose people if they think, oh, this is just about sharing stories, this is all a bit too fluffy for me. And that's really, really important at the moment, where the time scales are perhaps elongated for delivery. So normally we would have done a face-to-face delivery, probably over a month or 6 weeks. We would have done a really intense 2-day workshop to begin with, left it a month to 6 weeks for the champions to go out, have some conversations with different stakeholders, different parts of the business. And then we would have come back in and probably done another 1.5 day intense workshop around designing how. We've had to break that up, obviously, into the slide you saw, into lots of different online workshops. So that process can take probably anywhere between 6 weeks and 6 months, depending on how intense, how many sessions you want to book in for your champions. So yeah, it's really worth making sure that people understand what the whole process will involve, so we're not sort of turning people who are more orientated to tasks and actions off in the early stages. Bearing that in mind, it's also worth having a look here at what we can pre-book. It's a lot harder, clearly, at the moment to just rock up to somebody's desk, tap them on the shoulder and say, can I just have 5 minutes? Could I ask you a question about such and such? So looking at the opportunities to pre-plan your interactions with the stakeholders, with your champions, but also any other meetings you can kind of drop into to start conversations with. Maybe it's the HR team, maybe it's internal comms. You know, do they have regular online Teams or Zoom catch-ups, weekly catch-ups? Can you drop in and start to build relationships, start to ask questions in any of those forums? The final thing that I would like to say on this area here is it's also worth having a look at how you might be able to facilitate breakout sessions. So back in the days where we could do this face-to-face, that was easy, wasn't it? We just walked up to different groups and we said, how are you getting on? Do you need any help? Point them in the right direction. Breaking up into lots of small online sessions means that we're sort of the other side of a screen, not really knowing whether people are struggling and heading off in the wrong direction. So it's worth finding out, how can I have somebody drop in those sessions, or how can I have somebody who knows a little bit more about the process just to be listening in and be able to answer any questions that people have got. Okay. Right, I'm going to pop into chat and then I'm going to pop into Q&A. Do you recommend a role profile? Right, Leslie. Hi, Leslie. How do you ID the first champions? So again, this is something that we might want to cover in more detail at another session, but a couple of different ways. I mean, typically champions are people who they like talking to people. They can engage people socially. Sometimes if we ask for volunteers for security champions, we tend to find we get people who perhaps got a bit of a side love of technology, who are fantastic. We would not turn them away. But we also need people who have got very good, you know, they want to talk and talk to their teams. They're very kind of socially interactive. And there's a couple of ways that you could identify them. So, for example, if you're running maybe online sessions for other areas of security, a presentation, is there somebody that is asking a lot of questions, who shows quite a lot of interest, that you could then sort of say, well, you know, we're thinking about doing this champions thing. How would you feel about coming along and being a founder member? You know, it means you get to create the projects. It means you get to create the job description. So we're looking for people who are enthusiastic. The other way that we've done it in the past is perhaps slightly more formal, where we have created the provocation, the imagine, you know, you could be part of, and then we've just asked for people to volunteer. And we've run those sessions, those storytelling sessions, with massive groups of people who sometimes, you know, some people bail out and say, you know, not for me, but often a lot of people stick. So yeah, they're the two ways that we have looked at identifying champions in the past. Okay, I don't know if there's anything in Q&A, bear with me. Okay, nothing in Q&A. Okay, no problem. Anything else that people want to pop into chat? You're welcome, Leslie. Okay. So just as we're now, if you've got a an idea, perhaps you haven't got a question, but you've got an idea or something that you want to share, we can also open your mic up. So Leanne is going to monitor that. Just type into the chat, I've got something I'd like to share. We'll open your mic up and we'll hear from you. Okay, at the moment I can't see anybody, but please, if you've got anything you'd like to say, Leanne will carry on monitoring, and she'll probably jump around in front of me to let me know that I've got somebody that wants to speak. In the meantime, I'm going to get to this little visualization exercise that I spoke to you about. So I'm going to ask you to just close your eyes for a moment, and I want you to imagine you have gone away for 3 years. And when you come back, everything you ever wanted to do with your security champions has been achieved. It is changing the security culture of your organization. Now, as you return on your first day back to work, I want you to, as you walk in through the office door or log onto your computer, I want you just to notice what's different. Have a look around the office, the site. Have a look around your emails if you're still working from home. What do you see people doing differently in this new security culture? I want you to listen. What do you hear people saying that's different in your new security culture? So now if you just flutter your eyes open and find yourself a pen and paper, and if you could write down the first 2 or 3 words that come to your mind that you saw when I asked you to imagine, nice big bold letters, something to strive for. What's going to happen with your Security Champions program in your new future? Now, if anybody's got anything really cool, I'm sure you all have, then perhaps you want to pop those into the chat. Let's have a look and see what people imagined. Self-organized community. Thank you, Simon. Yes, absolutely. It can happen. It can happen. Yeah, I know security champions sometimes can take quite a long time and a lot of investment, but we do see a lot of people saying, do you know what, it's not consuming me now. Positivity amongst colleagues. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be great if everybody said, yeah, you know, we can make a difference. Champions, security experts be invited to critical project design meetings, empowerment, aspiration, recognition, praise for the network. Perfect. I really wish you all well. I think probably I'll check the Q&A again. Okay, we've got no questions in the Q&A, and I think we've got to the bottom of all of the chat. We've got one here. Post it in the break room for a brown bagged session to discuss a recent incident. Perfect, Leslie. And that's been posted perhaps by one of your champions and you didn't even know about it. Wouldn't that be amazing? Okay, cool. I think we are relatively close to the end in terms of questions. So I'll just pop my details up on the screen. Let's chat. I'm always happy to have one-to-one conversations with you about what's happening with your Security Champions programs, any tips or techniques. So here are my details, basically. I also just wanted to ask you one final little question. I've been completely overwhelmed, to be honest, about how many people signed up for the session and how many people are actually on live today. My colleague Leanne has been pestering me to do this for ages, and I kept saying, no, people are too busy, no one will turn up. So I'd like to just ask you, if we were able to kind of carry on and do maybe a series of webinars around our learnings on Security Champions, what else would you like to know about? There's a few things there. that that might be relevant. If there's something missing and I haven't put it in the poll, then just pop it into chat and we can have a look at organising something on those areas. So as people are putting their options in there, if I am too slow to get in contact with you, I'm normally quite good at responding to emails, but for any reason I don't, here's our inquiries mailbox that Leanne monitors, so is much better at responding than I am. But we can set up one-to-one chats if you want to talk, and we can also help, you know, if you need some support on actually rolling out your Champions program, from just simply some consultation to full implementation, or having a look at any of our resources that we've created for Security Champions. So, okay, so maintaining champion engagement seems to be the most popular, 72%, so amazing. Well, then consider that another webinar for the new year then. And we'll have a look at all of the other ones. Business case quite high up as well, and champion recruitments. Perfect. Okay, I think there is one more question that I haven't seen. So, James, hi James. A day 1 to 30 or 90 of starting the programme from Greenfield. Yeah, James, as in terms of a sort of basically a programme in terms of the set of actions. Yeah, that's something that we could do, I'm sure. Alicia, something else, an estimate of how much time investment is required of the individual teams would be to maintain this in-house. Maybe a tiered approach, depending on what the goal of the Champions programme is. Yeah, that is really, really valid. You know, you can't go into a Champions programme sort of expecting that it's not going to take a long time. Initially, it does take a fair amount of time of investment. So yeah, that would be useful. That's something that I can try and cover in another session. A future topic for a webinar. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, James. Awesome. Okay, and we have one in the Q&A. Hi, Joanne. I'm taking over an existing network of champions which historically didn't have the resource to run it. Any tips as to how I could get my champions more involved, please? It seems to be the same ones who volunteer all the time. So this is something that I've spoken to people about before, and it kind of links into getting budget and getting business cases, etc. Something that has worked in the past is just getting people to starting off little conversations, you know, kind of doing it under stealth, by stealth. There is a story from a colleague who said that he just started buying people coffee in the canteen. Obviously, that's something that we can't quite do at the moment. And that then progressed into getting budget for a pizza once a month to have conversations. Let me have a think of that for you, Joanne, and I can see if we can come back with some more specific things for your situation and home working. Okay, I think, oh, David, how to measure success. Yeah, this, as you can imagine, is something that that we've talked about quite a long time. David, actually, one of the things that you taught me was setting objectives and key results instead of key performance indicators. So one of the things that we've done for a lot of security programs is say, you know, what are the different objectives? What are we trying to achieve? And what are the key results? So if the objective, for example, is to reduce the amount of time somebody spends on managing the network because champions are self-motivated, some of the key results for that may be champions owning programs, things happening without me having to tell a champion. The other thing that we would look at, which is a bit more specific to security behaviour, is if we are looking, if the champions network decides, for example, to look at some specific security behaviours. So let's say it is around phishing emails, we would say, how can we identify what people are doing differently in terms of their behaviours, what they're saying, and what we're seeing? And they are two things that, as a security champion, they can monitor those things because they're having conversations with people at the grassroots of their business. So that's another thing that we would work with security champions to do, is to say, okay, if we're trying to minimize phishing emails, what are the key things that we would expect to see people doing and to hear people saying? And then there's some of the things that we can monitor to identify real changes in behavior. Good. So every time I say this, there's another question, but okay, now I think we have come to the end. So it's actually 10 minutes early, but thank you so much for everybody taking part today. I know I've got 2 questions that I said I would go away and think of a little bit more, some specifics. So I'm going to think about those now, and I'm going to pop those into the email you'll get from the Zoom platform tomorrow, along with the handouts on the questions. So yeah, keep in touch, and I hope to see you all in the new year when we do another Champions webinar. Thank you very much.